Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Drunertos, and I will be giving a brief presentation on my own practice titled The Way of the Seven-Petaled Flower, which has been developed out of my own exploration and extrapolation of the world tree. I'll begin the presentation with an overview of what I'll be speaking about. The presentation will largely follow snippets of myth that I have written to hopefully narrate my thought processes and explain how I arrived at the destinations that I have. And before I continue, I'll make the quick but important disclaimer that whilst my work is informed by academic works and research, it is largely a product of my own gnosis, derived through my relationships with the gods, which most certainly does not mean that it is true, or most certainly not the truth. And before I get into the myths themselves, I want to make clear that these myths are my own works. Though hopefully divinely inspired, they are, of course, inspired by the myths of ancient and contemporary religions, of academic works and ideas, and are indirectly affected by all of my life's experiences. The Gauls left essentially no myths behind of their own, other than a few bits in the writings of others or in the artwork that we have to interpret ourselves. Therefore, to bring the religion to the vibrancy that it deserves, I, like many others in this religion and others adjacent, have written our own myths and stories. Additionally, I will speak in a way that suggests that what I say are unassailable facts, but this is simply a lot easier for me to say than I believe, I think, I suggest, and similar phrases before I present everything. And with the disclaimers out of the way, let's begin. The flames beginning is the first and major portion of the presentation, where I'll now begin going through the aforementioned narrative. Becoming comes, and we are its heralds. It is time to wash this world in waters, to flood the inky dark with blazing light. Raise your voices in harmony, flood my body with your symphony. Speak that which is to come. The kenton, a Gaulish word which means the first, is the speaker of the previous words, and is in the myth the voice of the gods. This part of the story takes place in the time before time, in the unformed darkness. Through their words and the words of the other gods, all that was, is, and will be is spoken into an ember, feeding it. To fuel the fire further, the Kenton, and eventually the rest of the gods, feed themselves and all their ideas and hopes to the flame, therefore initiating the creation of the world. The Kenton, like the other gods in the myth, are all veiled, their identities hidden. This was an intentional decision on my behalf, as whilst I have my own ideas as to the identity of the Kenton, to leave the identity of this seemingly very important god unlabeled would hopefully cause others to think about which god or gods they see taking a similar role. These thought processes can help us reveal our own unspoken theologies. I am kindling to the flame. My body and mind becomes all in a burning blaze. First flame and first death. I become the fire which ratifies our words, the heart and soul of the world. And even though I am consumed, I am becoming. The Kenton and the gods have been consumed by the flame, but were not destroyed in the process. The flame represents an abstracted conception of creation, a non-destructive act of transformation. As you will hopefully see later, there is an equivalence between the gods and the flame, as the gods now coexist or constitute the flame. The equivalence continues with the seed which comes from the flame and also ultimately becomes the world tree, and therefore the three worlds we inhabit. This equivalence does suggest a monistic or similar theology, but that comes down to how one chooses to interpret the ideas presented in this myth. For example, does a candle which is lit from the flame of a match burn with the same flame as that which burns the match? Or are the flames on the candle and the match now distinct from one another, despite having a direct relationship? Timeless darkness, hear me now. Emerging, I am of you and not. Adorned with light I rise. I am a beacon to the others. In the darkness they will see me, striving to reach me. They will rise, and they shall be greeted with grace. The era of darkness is done. Rise. Sirona and her part in the myths exemplify the qualities of the gods, who existed before the flame, and through their sacrifice to the flame, now exist as descendants of the flame. Sirona is of the darkness before, but also carries the light of the flame which gave her form. She is a goddess of creation in her own right, as her silver light shines out into the darkness and inflames the passions and motivations of the gods who lay in a sort of stasis. The light which inspires the gods to rise and become embodied is the same light which inspires us to act, and therefore Sirona is our guide. Hear me now, great mother of mine, steadfast under your silver light. I have learned my arts and rites, and with your gift I am formed. Grant me your divine grace once more as I head out to spread your word. I am your staunch warden and word. Now all who hear me will know you. Issus, like all the gods and parts of the myth, present teachings for me. Issus was the first to worship another, the first student, and in that process becomes our teacher. We see him in art, such as the Pillar of the Boatman, cultivating the tree which is inhabited or protected by Tarvos, teaching us the art of cultivating sacred spaces and of sacrifice. Essus, as the first priest, sets out the responsibilities for all future priests and other ritual leaders, which in most contemporary polytheistic religions would include every practitioner. The cultivation and care of sacred space, sacrifice as a cornerstone of ritual, and devotion are some of the key teachings of Essus. Shining bright, you broke the formless. Your ever-burning flame is spring, and we are newly sprouted seeds, growing in the warmth you share. In your presence we are formed, we delight in and worship you, ever-sitting flame, resplendent. In your honor we spread your gift. Urbanus and Venus, under the inspiration of the august flame, and therefore perhaps themselves, create just like the fire does, by taking the darkness which is present in the sea of everything and giving it new form. The pairing of Urbanus and Venus speaks to different acts of creation, but both equally valid. Venus seemingly creates something out of nothing, encouraging dirt to produce plants and animals, but which suggests the wonders of evolution. Urbanus's acts of creation are more direct and perhaps anthropomorphic. While other animals create and use tools, comparatively humans have learnt the most from Urbanus, whose creation and thirst for knowledge, as seen in his role as the world traveler, shows great resonance with the human psyche. Together, Urbanus and Venus create a filigreed tree tower to house themselves, the other gods, and to act chiefly as a place upon which they can enthrone the flame. The enthronement of the flame allows the spread of its light and the beginning of the final acts of creation. The tree also, as all things in Albios, become an example for things to come. This is the most prominent act of creation by Venus and Urbanus, whose skills of growth and hammer, which originate from within themselves and from before the flame, produce the world via the light of the flame. Just like Sirona, this act of creation highlights the gods' dual nature of both the darkness and the light, of potential and realization. Heed me, O august inferno. Keenly I watch your flickering, and I am filled with direction. Come and inflame me with reason. Fill me with your eternal light. Allow me to champion you. I hold you aloft in the dark, and I am uplifted by you. Luxovius is a personal and independent form of the flame itself, brought about by an act of creation by Venus and Grabanus. He takes place, he takes the place of the god as the god of initiations, of secrets, and of seeking, as his first task was to seek out Brixta, the promise to find her being the very first oath. This act of oaths and seeking is enacted every year for me in a ritual dedicating myself to Brixta and Luxovius, with this year being the fourth celebration of the holiday. The act of Luxovius is much like the act that we as people undertake when, inflamed by passion and desire, we seek out the gods which lit our passion. Luxovius is a shepherd for us in this way, teaching us and helping us find our way in the mists when we seek out these gods that have almost been lost to time. Falling gracefully from heaven, a seed finds fertile ground to be guarded by a bull. Its roots sink deeply into the depths, drinking in the knowledge of wise waters. Sprouting quickly, it soaks up the love and the light of the sun, rising up to perfume the heavens. Quickly, the three worlds are connected by the loveliest of flowers, safely under Taurus's crescent horns. The poem I just recited brings us basically to the end of the narrative of creation and outlines how Sirona gifted a seed, sprouted from the flame which now sits atop the filigreed tree to Tarwos to care for. Tarwos then, through his sacrifice to feed the tree, becomes the rock and foundation upon which the three worlds are built, passing on qualities of himself to the worlds. His soul then takes up residence within the moon, which is simultaneously present in the heavens, this world, and in the other world, the liminal space. There is an equivalence between bulls and rocks in myth across the ancient world, which leads to an equivalence of bulls with foundations. This speaks quite directly to the role of Tawas in the myth, where he stoically offers his own body and blood to the world tree when it needs it most. The body of Tawas then becoming literally the foundation upon which the world tree, and therefore the world, grows. In this next section, I'll explain how I came to the concept of the seven-petaled flower, what it means, and what are the seven petals. The seven-petaled flower is a conceptualization of the three cranes that rest on Taurus's back, represented in different art. In my conceptualization, the three cranes become one, having three heads, six wings, and a tail, representing the three worlds and the seven foundational gods, respectively. Taos, in the art presented on the slide, is shown as the foundation upon which the three worlds, the seven-petaled flower, ultimately rests and relies on. The flower represents the interplay between divine multiplicity and oneness, which is also seen in the august flame. The flower, which is the very world itself, is also constituted of the seven foundational gods themselves, but also the lifeblood of Tawas. And yet, the gods exist within the flower and are dependent on the existence of the three worlds. This codependency on each other typifies to me the transitive nature of the gods, who can somehow be distinct individuals and yet so foundational to existence that they are existence itself. The three heads of the crane are presented in different colors. A golden head representing the heavens, Albius, a blue head representing this world, Bitus, and a red head representing Antumnus, the deep world, the other world. The colors are arbitrary but representative qualities that I associate with these worlds. Albius is the shining golden example upon which we look and strive towards. Bitus is the little blue dot upon which we live, where the cycles of life are well represented by the cycles of water. And Antumnus is the place of swelling mists and iron-rich springs that are accidentally, or purposefully, passed through when one goes too deep in the forest, fog, or the deep places of the world. Now, the seven petals of the flower, the foundational gods, are again another arbitrary choice on my part. Granus, Sirona, and Demona, as gods of sun, stars, and moon, respectively, govern time and make the world through their actions. Govern time and the occurrence of things. Together with Mercury, who writes all that was, is, and will be, grant people the qualities of love, skill, and wisdom, which help to shape the world. And finally, Tyrannos oversees the cycles of the world, whose wheel and chariot ensure the stability of transformation. The gods presented as the seven petals here could be different in one's own practice, but the acts of these gods suggest a core role. Venus and Gobanus in the myth were created or recreated by the flame, and they in turn recreated the world around them through acts of skill and love. And this cycle of recreation is an essential part of life in this world, and is also a goal of ritual itself, where we seek to copy the gods' acts of creation through sacrifice. Without the gods who govern time, Granus, Serena, and Demona, all events would take place at once, stifling or preventing creation. It is through the passage of time that we as humans can witness the gods' continued acts of creation and take part in their divine works. Mercury, who takes the place of divine scribe, historian, and prophet, delivers us divinely inspired knowledge so that we can come to know the gods and creation in some way. And Tyrannos, as protector of the cycle of creation, maintains the order under which we thrive, the unchanging state of change. These gods to me represent the essentials of creation, as without their actions, the foundations of the world would not be present. The myths and theological ideas that I've presented thus far also have an impact on the actual practices that I partake in day to day. The gods provide us examples, and as an act of devotion, we can, and I believe should, strive to be like them. My three main devotional practices are prayer, recitation, and cultivation. Prayer is straightforward. As was exemplified by Essos, we can learn much by hoping, dreaming, and submitting to the gods as a thanks for the guiding light that they provide regardless of our actions. This can take the form of a more formal ritual, or simply words of gratitude to the gods after experiencing something wonderful. Recitation is a bit of a vague term, but here it's referring to the utterance and the act of remembrance of divine names, myths, and poems. In practical terms, I often do this after or in the middle of prayer. For example, I may be making a prayer to Sirona, and in the middle I may chant her names and epithets. Recitation of divine names or divinely inspired works is common across religions, from the chanting and writing down of sutras in Buddhism and the ritual utterance of God's many names in Islam. The act of remembering and physically saying, signing through sign language, or writing connects us with the gods in a very focused way. Finally, cultivation, which is another abstract term. Cultivation here is meant to refer specifically to the growth and development of personal qualities to be more like the gods. These three qualities are Gala, skill, Pella, wisdom, and Kara, love. All that the gods do is inspired by and filled with their unconditional love. And while we can never be fully like them, we can strive towards the goal of love being our core motivation. Skill and wisdom are qualities that are used to create, to bring beauty and life into the world, just like the acts of Venus and Grabanus. There are no specific skills or wisdoms that we should cultivate, but we should always be striving to learn something new, to develop our skills in a particular field more, and to simply experience the world around us so that we can better understand the consequences, good or ill, of the actions we take. And coming to the end of my presentation now, I'll just briefly summarize what I've shared. I've presented my conceptualization of the three worlds and the world tree, the seven-petaled flower. The flower is simultaneously the gods themselves and the three worlds, being born from the seed of the flame itself that was fueled by the gods and later enthroned by them. This codependence of the gods and flame speaks to the dual nature of the gods as both independent individuals, as seen in the darkness, and as dependents whose form and very conceptualization of selfhood comes from an external source, much like ourself. The world itself contains this duality, where its form is independent of those that inhabit it, and yet whose final shape and function are dependent upon those that dwell within it. I thank you all for listening to my rambles. Uh, Finally, if you have any questions, I think we have time, as I think I probably finished that a little bit quicker than I was supposed to.
Yes. Well, we have plenty of time for questions then. A question from Reno. What does your typical myth writing process look like?
Uh, that's a good idea. That's a good question. It usually starts with an awful lot of uh, walking and hiking and swimming and just general observation of the world around me. I find that in these times it's quite easy to reflect and to have thoughts come sort of unbidden to you. Whether these thoughts are coming directly from the gods or are simply your subconscious working a little bit more actively. Um, that's where it begins. I often start with the writing of a single uh, poem or prayer, like some of those that I read out, and the myth kind of fleshes out from that point, basically. Sort of that's, I guess, the little seed that grows into the flower that is the myth.
All right. Yeah, lots of brilliant feedback. If there's no more questions, I will end the recording.